listening to the Devoted Dreamers podcast, and I'm your host, Merritt Onsa. I believe God has an unfolding plan for your life, a God-shaped dream just for you. But so much gets in the way, right? Fear, comparison, imposter syndrome. What if I mess this up? You are not alone in those feelings, and I'm so glad you're here for Season 8. Keep listening to gain some transformational tools that will help you release the lies so that you can freely show up in the world, offering your gifts, leaning on God in your weaknesses, and serving His kingdom with the dream He's given you. Hey dreamers, welcome to episode 190. In case you're new around here, I usually do solo episodes once a month, the first Wednesday of the month. And the rest of the month, I post interviews with Christian women every Wednesday morning talking about their God-shaped dreams. So again, if you're new, be sure to come back for one of those episodes. But you are here today because you've considered being a guest on a podcast. Maybe you've thought about this once or twice or considered like, hey, this might be fun. I love listening to podcasts. Wouldn't it be great to be a guest? As an opportunity maybe to talk about your dream or some expertise that you have in a specific area, but you have no idea where to begin to get on a podcast as a guest. So that's why we're going to talk about this today. This is my beginner's guide to being an amazing podcast guest. And the things we're going to cover in this episode really are for beginners. We're going to talk about why you'd want to be on a podcast, how to know which podcasts to pitch yourself to, how to prepare that pitch for the podcast host, and the one thing you must do, you must understand before you submit that pitch. Once you get a yes, how to prepare for the interview. I've got a few sound tips for the non-techie ones of you in the audience, and then what to do when you're on the show and after the show. So that's what we're going to cover today. Number one, why would you want to be a guest on a podcast? This maybe goes without saying, but if you're a podcast listener, you probably have felt that personal connection to a host or a topic or just a podcast in general because it's your favorite one, whatever it is. And you've thought, oh, I might have something to share. I want to get my dream out into the world, or I want to promote something that I have coming up, a product, a service, whatever it is, your coaching services, whatever you have going on. And so you'd want to be on a podcast to get an opportunity to share those things, to talk with somebody else, to have a fun conversation, and to have people listen in and enjoy that, learn something from it, or be entertained. So how do you know which podcast to pitch? It's quite possible you would not pitch like your number one favorite podcast to start with if it's one that has like a rather large audience. But it also really just depends on what your goal is. So are you interested in going on a podcast to promote your products and services? Is it that you just want to have a purposeful conversation about a topic that you're really passionate about? Or is there some means by which you'd be interested in like attracting their audience to something that you're working on? And it could be any combination of those things. So the things to consider as you think about which podcasts you might want to pitch is who their audience is, who are they talking to, what topics do they cover, and then you'll really want to think in advance of what you have to offer or contribute to the conversation. And this means that you probably should or have listened to their show at least a few times to know the context of the conversation, where the host is coming from, what type of guests they bring on the show. And so just think through, where is my message going to resonate the most? Where do I have something to contribute? And what podcast hosts do I think I might click with? So that's how to know, at least from the beginning, what podcast you might want to pitch. And that one thing I said that you must understand before you pitch, this is really important if you're not going to come across as being super self-serving, is that you are asking permission to speak to their audience. You are basically saying, Can I have the ears of the audience that you've built this week? Like if it's a weekly podcast, can I have their ears for this week and on into eternity? Because as we know, podcasts can survive as long as the host is continuing to pay for their hosting services. So you'll want to just really be respectful and honoring that the host has done hard work and built an audience and built trust with their audience, and they don't owe you airtime on their show, right? It's a privilege to get invited to be on somebody's show. And from the perspective of a listener, the listeners come to this podcast for something specific. So that message needs to jive with the things that they are used to hearing from this host. Like, in essence, you need to be on brand for whatever you're coming to share, whatever podcast you're coming to share on. And the host has a responsibility and feels a great responsibility to maintain some consistency along those lines. Because if you're consistent and unclear, it's the best way to lose audience members because they're like, oh, this show isn't at all what I thought it was. They keep shifting gears or whatever. And so if you fall outside the purview of what a show's topic is or it's focused on, it's really not reasonable to expect a yes when you ask, like, hey, can I come on your show? So here's a great example from my own personal experience. I interview only Christian women on the Devoted Dreamers podcast. I do that and I do solo episodes. And that is a choice that I made from the very beginning. So sure, there are a few men, as I've heard their stories, I've thought, wow, oh gosh, I would love to share that story or know more about what that person went through to pursue this particular dream. In fact, there's more than a few. There's several. But I have stuck to my original decision and kind of brand of my show that I'm a show for women, by a woman, by women, and that is who I interview on a consistent basis. So if you're a man or you are representing a man, please do not pitch them to be a guest on my show. What it tells me is you've never listened to one episode to even know that this is what the show's about, or you don't understand, if you have listened, you don't understand the premise of the Devoted Dreamers podcast. And that alone is enough to tell me that you are not the right guest for this show, man or woman, right? So even if you have the most beautiful story about a God-shaped dream, if it comes across like you are being self-promotional, I'm probably not going to ask you to be on my show or say yes to your pitch, or even in some cases, respond to the email because you're just not a good fit. So here's what you need to know for the pitch. If you are reaching out to a podcast host for opportunity to potentially be on their show, and if you're already a content creator, whatever that looks like, you're a blogger, you're a podcaster, a YouTuber, whatever, I suggest looking for shows, podcasts with a similar audience to yours, to the best of your ability to determine that. So if you're a podcaster, you may be familiar with this on Apple Podcasts. You can search for your own show. And then when you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there will be an extra little section that's called Listeners Also Subscribe To. So you can see a whole list of shows that listeners are subscribed to that are similar to your audience. So Apple is kind of telling you, like, here, people like your audience also listen to these shows. So those are a great place to start in thinking about pitching. If you're talking about something as a podcaster that's similar to somebody else's podcast. And so no matter who you are, podcaster or not, my suggestions are, just like you would to build any relationship, you're going to want to get to know the show and the host. And you can do that really simply, just like in a vetting process, by listening to one or two, maybe 3 episodes of their show and try to see if you can get a bit of a variety so that, like on my show, I'd want you to maybe listen to a couple of my solo episodes and a couple of interviews on totally different topics. And then listen for, like, during those interviews, what segments are repeated every time. Like some people do, like, what are your 3 favorite things, or what are you loving right now? A shout out to a mentor or a friend or a favorite book or whatever. So, if you're going to pitch to somebody who does some of that kind of stuff, you may want to pay attention and think about how you would answer that. Not that you need to put that in your pitch, but if it's not obvious, also, this is another separate tip. If it's not obvious how to say the host's name, listen while you're listening to that episode or their interviews. Like, listen to how the host pronounces his or her name and practice saying that out loud so you don't embarrass yourself if you're reaching out to them. And then once you're ready, like you've discerned, okay, here's 2 or 3 podcasts that would be a great fit for the message that I want to share. They're a similar audience to mine. Maybe they're in the same industry, but they do something different than what you do. You'll email the host. You can include a really brief introduction about who you are and what you do, what you like about their show or the guests that they've had on. That's really helpful to let them know that you've listened, like something that clues them in that you've heard their show is a big deal. And then suggest a few talking points that you could add to the conversation. So something like, oh, I really enjoyed listening to your interview with so-and-so on the topic of such and such. Here are a couple of things that I like to talk about on that topic and I think would be a great addition to the conversation on your show, on your podcast. And even better than an email, or even in advance of sending an email, if you're able to build a relationship with the host on social media, maybe even connect with them in the DMs, ask, hey, would you be up for a coffee chat just to get to know one another? And it would be a great way to just kind of assess if there's some synergy there between the two of you. Or if you're like, oh, I see this person has a big audience, I just want to, attract their audience to mine. It kind of helps you discern kind of your own heart intentions. Like, why am I really wanting to talk to this person? Right? So build a relationship, make that pitch, be as purposeful as you can for what you have to offer their audience and their show and what you can add to that conversation. So once you get that yes, the person is like, yeah, I think this would be great, or you've had a coffee chat with them and you really feel like you hit it off, there's some things that you can do to kind of prep yourself. And you're going to want to do this, especially if you're really new to being a podcast guest. And, this episode's for beginners, so I'm guessing you might be pretty new. You're going to want to spend some time getting familiar with their audience. So if they have a presence on social media, go check them out, see comments on their posts. You can even ask the host, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing about your audience. Am I way off base here? Or, tell me a little bit about what you know about your audience, the things that they're interested, maybe some demographics and stuff like that. And then again, if you're brand new to speaking engagements, you're going to want to prepare, I like to say just like a couple of stories, like something that relates to the topics that you want to share on. And, some sort of illustration, 1 to 2 illustrations that communicate a relevant point related to your message. And you're going to want to practice sharing those in a concise manner. Practice them with a friend, with your spouse, whatever. Because if it's going to take you 20 minutes to communicate a story, you've lost the audience. Podcasts, especially today, people don't have a ton of time. Especially, I don't know about men, but if you're talking to an audience of women, if they have small children or they're entrepreneurs, like you gotta be on top of it. Otherwise, people are gonna give up. And then also, you want to avoid rehashing things that you've said a dozen times elsewhere. So if you're going on 12 podcasts this year, you're not going to want to tell the same 12 stories over and over again. So you're going to want to think through what are some ways that you can add variety to the message that you want to communicate, put a new spin on it, or tell a different story. But have your illustrations or your stories, practice sharing them, and don't tell the same ones over and over again. I'm not saying that you can't tell similar things or you can't speak about a similar topic, but if people are following multiple similar types of podcasts, it's like, oh, there's that person again. They're telling the same old stories. Okay. And then know your lane. So what I mean by this is know a bit about your personality and the types of things you like to share. Are you there to inspire or entertain? Are you there to educate? Are you helping solve a problem? Like, which of these do you excel at? And be yourself. Like, don't try to be somebody else. Like, I would not say that I'm an entertainer. I'm not, I'm a little bit more like fun serious maybe. And kind of educate is more my cup of tea. So it's helpful to just kind of know a little bit about who you are. If you're not sure, maybe ask somebody who knows you really well. Like, which of these things do you think I am more of? And entertain, inspire, educate, problem solver, so that you can show up authentically to your personality. It comes across so much better when you show up as who you are than when you show up trying to be somebody that you're not. Okay, so one of the other things to think about is if you're coming on somebody's podcast, it's a great way to promote a freebie, a way that the audience or the listeners might be able to get on your email list to stay connected with you. So first of all, you're going to want to be sure you have permission to do this first from the host. Obviously, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, how can the listener, find you or follow you? So you share your website or your social media handles. But if it's okay with the host, this is a great opportunity to offer like a free worksheet or some sort of free something, that's like a lead magnet for yourself. So I want to share a specific story about a guest I had that I think did this really, really well one time. So she had prepared a landing page specifically for listeners who wanted to go deeper and get to know her a little bit better and offer her support and services to my listeners, which was great. I loved it because she was offering something that would be helpful for my listeners, but wasn't competitive with anything that I was offering. So her messaging was targeted to the listener that came to my show, and she had a specific link for a landing page that went to her website. And when the person got to the website, it said, hey, welcome. Thanks so much for listening to my episode on the Devoted Dreamers podcast. So this was the only place she used this link. And it was the first step of her beginning to build a relationship with the people who had heard her on my show. So there on that page, they could sign up for her freebie. And I suspect after that, it meant they would join her email list and receive like an email welcome series that kind of welcome them into the resources and information that she provides on her site. I thought this was an excellent strategy to help those listeners who most resonated with her message to get more of what they needed and wanted. So the takeaway from that is that, it might require you being a little bit strategic if you would like to continue the relationship or build the relationship with people that listen to you from this other podcast's audience. So, this may not be a beginner strategy, but it's something to think about to be strategic if you're going to be giving something away. And then here's something that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about unless you're in some sort of like voice training industry, but you're going to want to prepare vocally for being on, well, not on camera, on mic. So think about what it's like to answer a phone call the first thing in the morning, which this may not happen very often in the modern era. But think about it, like I call my dad sometimes and he's like, hello, and I'm like, did I wake you? And he's like, no, you're just the first person I've talked to today. But you do not want to show up maybe after sitting at your desk all day and the podcast host being the first person you've talked to in several hours with that crackly, almost falling asleep sound in your voice. You want to be energized and lively and ready vocally for the call. So my tips for you on this, right before you get on the call, this sounds silly, but do a few jumping jacks in the room or running in place just to get your heart rate up a little bit. Like it gets your blood flowing a little bit more if you've been sitting at your desk for a long time prior to getting on a call. And obviously you're going to want to give yourself a few minutes before the call begins to catch your breath so that you're not like, hi, I just ran up 16 stairs. But raising your energy level a little bit will help keep you from sounding like you just got out of bed, right? And if you don't have time for that, it's like, oh, I totally forgot to do my jumping jacks before I jumped on the mic. Try out some tongue twisters just to kind of like awaken your mouth movements and your brain a little bit, like seashells. See, I can't even do it. She sells seashells by the seashore. That's a good one. Because we do tend to like trip over some of those more complicated sounds when we haven't been using our voice much. And then what about nerves? I get this question of like, oh my gosh, they're going to know that I'm nervous. So if you're freaking out and feeling totally nervous right before like your very first podcast interview or an interview with somebody that maybe you've held up on a pedestal, like, trust me, I've been there. I want you to take some deep breaths. If you have time, like go run or walk around the block, like get outside, get some oxygen flowing into your body. But it's okay to be nervous. Like use that. Let the energy of nervousness serve you instead of crippling you with fear about the what ifs, like the what if they can tell I'm nervous. So what? Honestly, I would guess most people would not be able to tell that you're nervous. Just you. And it feels like 10x because it's inside your body. But, try one of these, take a deep breath, run around the block, use the nervousness to your benefit. But most importantly, pray before you begin. Ask God that he would use you and your words for his kingdom and remind you that this is not about you. It's not about you. It's a privilege and an opportunity for you to get to share your story or your wisdom or your expertise or your entertainment or your inspiration, but it is not about you. He's given you gifts to use and share with the world, and he asks you to share them. So go do it and ask him to help you see that it is not about you. Okay, and a little bit of techie help for those of you who feel like a newbie in this realm. Wear headphones. So the kind of headphones that have a mic that you would use for phone calls, it gives you like an external mic separate from your computer. Like this is if you're doing like a Zoom meeting or a Skype call. It helps kind of contain the sound better. And that's, if you don't have like a podcasting microphone or a headset that has a mic attached to it, just simple headphones that you would use with your smartphone work great. I really encourage you to take the call in a room that has carpet. I face windows, but they have curtains in front of them. So anything that's like soft, the most softness that you can add to your space of what your voice is going to bounce off of, the better. Hard things, no good. Wood floor, tile floor, those are big no-nos for being a podcast guest or host. And a real trick, I know lots of podcasters that do this. If you have a walk-in closet filled with clothes, that is an excellent space to record a podcast interview. Or another option would be sitting in your car outside your house, like not driving, of course. But as long as the internet or cell reception is good there, that's another possible option. Like say you have kids screaming in the house, like that's a great option. Go sit in your car. But you're definitely going to want to have a strong internet connection if you're recording on Zoom or Skype or a similar program. So test that out in advance. There's nothing worse than getting on a podcast interview and the sound is either like in and out because your internet is sketchy or the person can't hear you at all. That's just, a total loss, right? And then finally, from a tech perspective, if you're still like, I am so clueless, I don't know what I'm doing, ask questions of the host in advance, like email them or, send a quick message. Like they want the audio to be good, probably even more than you do. And no one is born knowing this stuff. And it can be a little complex. So don't be afraid to ask if you're not sure about something. They would certainly give you some tips of how you could have this work out with less stress. We're to the during the call. So all of that was the prep. So during the call is here. It's time. Get ready to shine. Some of this is super obvious, but it has to be said. Speak clearly. Don't try to rush through it. Be concise. Nerves can make us speak a little bit faster. So like take those deep breaths. It's okay to even like pause and take a deep breath during the interview. Like they can edit that stuff out. You can even ask like, hey, I think I need a minute. It's okay. But share your heart honestly. Like I said earlier, be yourself, be who God created you to be. Remember that it is less about you and more about how you can serve the audience and how you can connect with the host. Those are all great things to focus on. And if you've, done some prep in advance, it's okay to use notes if you need them to feel more comfortable or to like not forget something really important that you wanted to mention. But I urge you, please do not read from your notes. A conversation is way more appealing to the listener than a recitation. And it is fairly obvious when someone is reading from their notes, especially if you're kind of new at this. So trust in who God made you. Have a couple notes jotted down, but be conversational and engaging and interactive with the host and be present right where you are and do your best, like not to worry about the outcome. Like it's going to be okay. And anything that is not okay can truly, honestly be edited out. After the fact, the interview is done. It went great, right? You did great because you were so prepared. Way to go, you. But at this point, your job is not over. So I encourage you to thank the host with a follow-up email, or if they send one to you, respond to that with your thanks for, them taking the time to have you on the show. That's common courtesy and quite polite. But you're going to want to confirm the date of when the interview is going to be posted and live and ready for everybody to hear. Put it in your calendar so you know that you're not going to miss it. And then just plan in if you do a lot of like social media planning in advance, plan in that schedule for that day or that week, when you're going to share and where you're going to share. And let me tell you, as a podcast host, I super appreciate it if you share in a place that's not just Instagram stories that's going to disappear in 24 hours and, 70% of their audience isn't going to see it in the first place. So, be prepared to like share it on your Facebook or on your Instagram or, post something from their website on Pinterest. Or a really great way to share is if you have an email newsletter, to send a link out with that and talk about your experience and how great it was and the type, a couple little tidbits of what you shared. That I will tell you, I have one guest who I know for sure did this because I'm on her email list. And so I saw it. And her episode is by far the most listened to of all my episodes, even today, like a year later, because she shared it very personally with her audience. And when you check in with the host, you might also ask, like, is there anything that they're going to send you to help promote? Like a lot of people will do these audiograms where there's like the wave and the audio and sometimes some captions. You can like hear a little snippet or quote from the conversation. But like, are you going to send me, some promotional images, or am I on my own for that? Do I just reshare what you shared? Kind of get some clarity on that after the fact. And then if you plan on doing a lot of podcast interviews, I always think it's nice to create kind of like a media page or, listen to my thoughts elsewhere section on your website. I have mine at the bottom of my about page where you can really easily like add in your podcast appearances with a little like the cover art image from their show so that it establishes you as, knowledgeable expert on whatever these topics are that you're speaking about on other people's podcasts. So just to recap, in this episode, we covered why you would want to be a podcast guest, how to know which podcast to pitch yourself to, how to prepare to pitch yourself to a podcast host, and the one thing that you must understand before you send your pitch. Then once you get a yes, how to prepare for the interview. I included a few sound tips for the non-techie among us, and then tips for during and after the interview. And these are just a few ways to help you as a beginner shine in your first podcast appearances and those that follow. And I'm sure I have forgotten some really important tips. So if you have some thoughts and ideas to contribute to this conversation, you can head on over to the show notes for the Devoted Dreamers podcast and leave your comments and suggestions there. You will find those at merrittonsa.com/podcast/190. Thanks so much for being here today. Thanks for listening today. Don't let the conversation end here. Let's connect over in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group on Facebook. We're building a sweet community of dreamers, so no one has to walk this road alone. You can find the group at bit.ly/dreamergroup. I'll see you in there.